Hello there, Birdie here with another video for you. This time we're going to go back into some tactical analysis and we're going to discuss planning for a tournament and trying to build a competitive, balanced list to try and take on all comers that you might face. Now, the plan for the video is we will first of all go through all the different general list building considerations that you should take into account when you're putting together your list. We're going to discuss each of those aspects depending on the points level of the event you'll be going to. So whether it's a lower point event between about 300 and 600, whether it's a mid-level points event about 600 to 750, or if it is a high point event between 750 and 1000. And at the end, I'll provide what I believe is an example of a very balanced list that's kind of capable of taking on all comers. And at the end, of course, I will encourage you all to like and subscribe if you have enjoyed the video. So first of all, let's get on to the army list building considerations. So whenever I'm building a list myself, these are the things I'm considering. So if I get drawn against it at an event, how will the army that I've built deal with each of these things? So first of all, if you come up against a heavy shooting army, how are you going to deal with it? Now, there's different types of heavy shooting armies. Is it a sheer volume of fire, where they've got a lot of dice, whether they're not particularly high strength or particularly good at hitting, but if there's a high volume of them, or if it's just quality shooting like elf or some dwarf shooting. Also Dale as an example that isn't elf or dwarf. Even evil do have a few options for that. So if you're facing a Harad list with poison bows, maybe the betrayer, giving rerolls, or you're facing Isengard with a ballista or just with crossbows, that sort of thing. So if you're drawn against a heavy shooting army, how are you going to deal with it? So have you brought some high defense frontline troops to mitigate and nullify your opponent's shooting? Have you got numbers that can just deal with taking some casualties on the way in? Do you have some sort of special rule or magic that can help deal with shooting, like blinding light or elven cloaks? Do you have fast mobility that allows you to get up in the face of your opponent before they've had the chance to use their bows much? That's the sort of thing I'm considering. A big one for me is building an army. Unless you've got some sort of special rules or you're extremely quick and mobile, a key thing for me when I'm building lists is I always think, can I get some defense 6 into my list here? And I would say if you can get defense 6 into your list, I will always try and get minimum 8 models, preferably 10 D6 models into my list. And the reason I do this is you can run a double rank of D6 on the way. And if your opponent has a heavy shooting list and they sit in their deployment zone 12 inches into the board, just say it's one of those scenarios, and you have to march towards them. Most shooting is strength 2 and 3. There is some exceptions, you've got some strength 4, but most shooting is strength 2 or 3. If you have defense 6, they need 6s to wound you. It massively reduces the number of casualties you're going to take. So when I say run a double rank, is if you are walking into a heavy shooting list and you have 10 D6 models, you can run them as a double rank of 5. And okay, when you get there, they're not going to be able to space support each other and all of this, but it's worth it for mitigating the damage that you take on the way in. And everything else you've got that's a bit squishier or you want to protect, keep them behind that double rank. And yes, your opponent will still get some shots through to them, but that double rank of D6 will massively reduce the damage you take on the way in. So that's a personal thing I like to do. Unless I've got some sort of special rules, or I think I can win the shooting war myself, perhaps. Next point we've got here is terror. So there wasn't that much terror around prior to the Armies of Middle-earth book coming out. However, you do now have the return of the Black Numenorian line. There is things like Army of the Dead out there. You've got a host of the Witch King that causes terror within certain bubbles. It's something to consider. Also, there's a lot of single models that have terror. There's quite a few good models that now have terror, and there's a lot of evil models that have terror. And you need a reliable way of engaging them in a battle. So it's something to consider. How will I deal with terror if I come against it? How will I deal with my army having a -1 Harbinger potentially nearby as well? It also kind of ties into endgame as well. What will you do when your army breaks? You need some sort of reliable courage. Now, a lot of good armies don't need to worry too much about this. Predominantly, they have pretty good courage across the board. You do get some more average men armies that are a bit lower on courage. But a lot of those armies have different special rules or different ways of getting their courage up, such as war horns, special rules relating to heroes being nearby. There's even like fearless banners with Halbarad and other options. So I'm not going to go too much into the good side of things. For evil, there's some evil armies that can take relatively high courage troops, which is good. But I think you want to be considering heroes that will hold your army together. So an example I will use is Pits of Dol Guldur, for instance. Now, Azog has a big 12-inch standfast. It affects other orc heroes. He will hold your army together. But what happens if he dies in the battle? Or what happens if he gets tagged? That list doesn't have a secondary good courage hero to hold the army together, except the Keeper of the Dungeons. Now, many players, when you discuss Pits of Dol Guldur, will say, oh, well, it's not great to take him because he's 80 points, he's only got 2 wounds, he can die very easily. And yes, all of those things are true. However, you can learn to play him with practice, and him being courage 5+ with 3 will means he's extremely reliable at sticking around and holding your army together. Now, if you learn to play him and use him carefully, he can nearly always survive to the end game. And if you break and one of your big heroes gets tagged, at least you have a second one that is a good contingency for you to hold your army together. And you don't want all your eggs in one basket, is kind of what I'm saying. So with evil armies, you might have a ring wraith, a witch king, that is very, very good sticking around. But what happens if they're not there or they get tagged? How are you keeping your army together and not just running and losing the battle because of it? How are you engaging your opponent? Now, you can just go with a numbers game of have high enough numbers that they can take enough courage tests that some will pass and be able to charge and engage your opponent. But in general, I like to make sure I've got some of the higher courage troops that I can get in an evil list in my army. And when you know you're up against some terror-causing troops or heroes, you can position those higher courage troops knowing that you want them to be the ones that are engaging that particular enemy or that particular model. Anyway, next thing to consider is magic. Now, there's 2 considerations here. One is how are you going to be able to deal with magic? Who is likely in your army to be the person targeted by your opponent's magic? And second, you want to consider how would I shut down my opponent's magic if they have some. So a few things to consider with this one. of, if they have a caster, if they have just one caster, which is normally the case, there's not that many double caster lists, and if they're going to be targeting your key model, how is that key model going to hold up against it? Have they got resistance to magic? Have they got loads of will? Have they got a way of getting back will? Have you got anything in the army that can protect them? Heroic resolve, maybe. Is there anyone in your list with heroic resolve? Not that you see many people run heroic resolve, but on a big turn where you really need somebody to be active and doing something, it could be worth calling. Situationally. If you have only one big hitter and you've got a real big reliance in your list on one person doing all the work for you, if they get shut down with magic, how would your army work? Can they just endure it and survive till the late game whilst being mostly immobilized and transfixed and what have you? And then when they've run out of magic or run out of steam with their will, can you then get them to go to work and still win the battle? Is that possible? How can you shut down your opponent's caster? Do you have mobility? Do you have flying models? Do you have other hitters that can reliably call heroic combats to threaten and get into your opponent's magic? Those are the considerations with magic in my eyes. If you're running, for example, a fiefdoms list, they are extremely weak to magic. If you're running a fiefdoms list, are you going to have secondary hitters that can do damage while Imrahil is stood there doing nothing the whole battle? Can the army still work? Build it in a way that it can. Next, we move on to high numbers. So if you were to face a proper horde list, a really high numbers, above average numbers for the points level, can you deal with it? Now, there's ways of playing around it. You can have a more elite army. You can try and fight them in choke points. But you've got to consider yourself, if I face an army that outnumbers me, even if you've got a good amount of numbers yourself, if you face somebody that's really gone all in on numbers, how are you going to deal with high numbers? Are they going to be able to wrap you and envelop you and get at your flanks? If they do, how am I going to deal with that? Now, a couple of answers to you there is keep a bit of a reserve force behind your lines. And when they try and wrap and envelop your flanks, do you have an element of your army that can countercharge and destroy their isolated flanking forces? Because any flanking force has to slightly overcommit, in which case you could countercharge and get them back. Whether that be infantry, I think more likely and the better option is you have a hero or two behind your line that's mounted. You can also have some cavalry that can stay with them as well. And when your opponent tries to hit round your flanks, you can hit with the heroes and the cavalry and you can clear them out pretty quickly. And that will stop the flanking. And then your main battle line against their main battle line should come out on top because you've likely got a higher quality of troop than they have. Essentially, you also want to make sure you've got a banner well placed to make sure your quality troops get the dice support they need to make sure they're winning a lot of fights. Against high numbers as well, usually high numbers armies will not be particularly high strength, in which case, again, have you taken D6? Do you have a D6 front line? That will help hold up horde armies. Now we move on to high defense. So high defense armies, the obvious one that comes to mind is dwarves, but there's some other armies as well, such as like Ministerial shield walls and things like that. Even if you're an army that only takes strength 3, can you deal with defense 6 armies? It's also a big consideration for me. I swear by D6. But I also consider it in my thinking of, okay, if other people are also bringing heavy D6 consideration armies, how am I going to deal with that? How can I crack through a high defense army? And the answer is, you need to make sure you have hitters in your list, whether that be heroes or troops. You need damage dealing in your list. Now, what I mean by this is a lot of heroes are strength 4, which is pretty good. Against D6, they'll get through them on 5s. But I mean, have you got any +1 to wounds? Have you got 2-handers? Have you got cavalry? Have you got lances? Have you got special rules that give you additional bonuses to wound in some way? These are all key things to build into your list. Now, when it comes to like 2-handers in your list, it's a bit of a risk because you don't want all 2-handers, because then you'll lose a lot of dual rolls and your army might fold quite quickly. So you've got to balance it. I'd say in a normal list that isn't just like an elf that can hand and a half whenever it wants. A normal list, I'd say maybe build in, for every frontline shield guy you've got, for every 2 of those, have a reserve force behind your main line of 2-handers, a single 2-hander. So if you just say, for instance, have a warband where you have 6 shield guys and 6 spears behind them, maybe take 2 or 3 2-handers that'll just sit behind the line, and you can pick and choose where you engage them, where you want the damage, where you want to have that extra hitting power. That's kind of a rule of thumb I kind of generally build towards. I find it works really nicely to, you can pick and choose where you want them to engage in the line. They can help with hitting. Also with your heroes, if you just take all support heroes, if you take all magic casters, captains, taskmasters, all these sort of things, your general like support heroes, captains, all this, they don't really have hitting power for you. You need something that can do damage for you. Have you got a monster hero? Have you got a hero that can hand and a half, 2-hand, burly, can actually do damage for you? You need to be able to guarantee damage at different points of the battle. Kind of moves nicely on to monsters, which is, monsters are quite popular. They are better this edition, which is nice. How is your army going to deal with facing monsters, singular or plural? Monsters generally have quite high fight values. Do you have a way of matching or getting above their fight value? Do you have a way of immobilizing them? Do you have a way of reducing their effectiveness? Do you have numbers that can just tap hit them and hold them up so they don't get their value back? All different ways you can combat monsters. And you also need to, going back to the previous point, monsters generally have higher defenses. You need to make sure you can win a fight against them maybe with fight values, but can you actually deal damage to them? That's another big consideration. Moving on, we go to all hero lists. Now, these aren't particularly common in this edition because numbers are quite prevalent in a lot of scenarios. I think you are going to see the resurgence of these. People like hero lists because it's got a lot of character and personality. They also have a lot of might in the lists. You've got to think, how am I going to deal with that? What would be my approach to dealing with an all-hero list? Can my heroes go toe-to-toe with an all-hero list? Do I need to rely on my numbers? Again, can you deal damage? You might be facing, I don't know, an Erebor Reclaimed list with all D8 heroes. Are you going to have a load of your troops be completely ineffective because they've got no damage potential? All these things to consider. Can you outmaneuver them with maneuverability and mobility in your list? Kind of tying into it, high fight value armies. So this could be an all-hero list, or it could be just an elf army with fight 5, fight 6, things like that. How are you going to deal with that? Have you got the ability to envelop them with numbers? Can you outflank them? Do you have hitting power with cavalry to get around them? Have you got ways of getting above their fight value? What about your heroes? Are they going to render some of your heroes ineffective because they only have, just say you've got fight 5 heroes that can't strike? Are they going to be a lot less effective if they suddenly go up against an elf line? These are things to consider. If you did face an elf list, how am I going to deal with Another one to consider is mounted lists. So you don't see many of these around, and cavalry isn't the strongest in this edition. But if you face an all-mounted list, how are you going to deal with it? Have you got a shooting threat to threaten their horses? Do you have a line that can deal with their initial first charge if they get to choose that first engagement? Again, D6 helps. Do you have a way of contesting moves with them? Have you got a decent amount of might? Because they're going to always want to be charging, so they are going to be wanting to contest heroic moves with you. Do you have a way of contesting that with them? They'll generally have a lot of might to bounce around as well. Do you have ways of providing a fight value threat to them, where you can get heroes in and stop them from combating and instead having to strike in defense? How are you going to deal with an all-mounted list if you face it? How will you deal with their mobility? Do you have mobility yourself to be able to contest objectives and the board? All things to consider. Next, what about if you face a really big hero, a proper monster centerpiece, a Sauron, a Balrog, a dragon, these sort of things? How are you going to deal with that if you face it? Can you immobilize them in some way? Can you reduce their fight value? Can you get up to their fight value yourself? Can you deal damage if they do mess up a dice roll? Again, it's building for these similar sort of things. You need hitting power in the list. And then last of all, scenarios that require mobility, which is most of them. How mobile is your army? Can you build it with mobility? You need to be able to get around the board. You need to be able to threaten your opponent from a distance. Something to consider when you're building an army list is, have I got some mobility in this list? If you don't, you might win games at tournaments, but you're going to struggle to score very highly consistently with VPs. Mobility is very, very key in this game. I would advise you always build with mobility in mind. You don't need to be all mobile at all. I really strongly recommend you have a good solid core of foot troops. You don't need everybody to be whizzing around the board at full speed. Also, you'll be on bigger bases. It's easier to get isolated, dragged down. You want to have a good consistent battle line somewhere, but you need mobility to complement it, is what I would say. So then let's move on to discussing at different points levels. So 300 to 600. In terms of model counts, first of all. So yes, you're going to have lower numbers, but I think there's a certain threshold you need to be getting to. I don't think you can be investing in massive heroes, or if you can, it needs to be only one, because you need to be minimum 25 to 30 models at any points level, I'd say. Anything lower than that, you're really handicapping yourself in your ability to move and contest everything you need to be, and you're handicapping yourself. There's ways you can make it work, and there's certain lists that do and will be strong in certain scenarios with low model counts. But I'm talking about, this whole video is me talking about producing a competitive, balanced list, not min-maxing, not guaranteed to win half the scenarios, but guaranteed to be massively handicapped in the half of the scenarios. I'm talking about taking a good balanced list to the tournament that every game you should be able to contest and have a good chance of competing and winning, if you play it right and if dice rolls kind of go your way and these sort of things. So model count, I'd say you want minimum 25 to 30 models at this low end of this low points. When you get into 600, I think you want minimum 30, pushing towards 35 for a balanced list. If you're evil and you've got some cheaper troops, maybe 40 at 600. Also, if you're a bit weak to shooting, maybe 40 plus. Anything higher than that, you may be reducing the quality of your troops or reducing your might. That means you've turned into a proper horde, in which case you'll struggle and lose at things like Lords of Battle. I think there's a balance to be had, somewhere between 30 and 42 models, depending on the faction you are in the heroes. In terms of heroes, at the lower end of this points bracket, I'd say you only really want to be running 2 heroes. At the higher end, you can maybe fit in 3 or 4, depending on the faction you are and how cheap and cost effective some of it is. But I think 2 to 3. A lot of lists might be restricted with what they can take as well. A lot of lists kind of force you to take one decent sized big hitter, take them, and then follow up with 1 or 2 smaller to mid heroes to back them up with might. Moving on to might, there we go, what a beautiful segue that was. We have how much might you need. I would say that, now I like having a bit of might. I like having control. It's the biggest thing I'd say might gives you, is it gives you control in the battle. At 600, you want somewhere between 7 and 9. Anything lower, it depends on the heroes you're taking, but you want minimum 5, I'd say. No matter what points level you're running at, 300 plus, you want minimum 5. You don't want to go all in on 1 warband with 1 hero that's got 3 might. You are really handicapping yourself. You will feel it when you're playing. I think you want about 5 minimum. Personally, I like to try and push it a little more if I can, get closer to somewhere in the 7 to 9 region. But that's just my own personal play style. Now, the next one you might find is a strange question, but I do think there's merit to this question, which is to banner or not to banner. It depends on your list. If your army is expecting your troops to carry the day for you due to their quality, whether you're running elves or dwarves or some quality evil army, do you really need a banner? The answer is yes, you do, because each of your fights, you're going to have a lot of fights involving troops, they need the banner. If, however, you're running quite a low quality army and you're running more support heroes than big heroes, or maybe you've got just 1 decent hitter hero, do you need a banner? And my answer is maybe not. And I say this because banners are expensive and it will reduce your model count significantly by 2 or 3 or even 4, depending on the list you're running. Now, if you are running relatively low fight value armies, if you're running fight value 3 in particular, or even 4 in my opinion, I'm not sure you quite need a banner. And I know this is a controversial take and people will disagree with me here. But if you're running a fight 3 army, most troops you're fighting are going to be better than you. So when you're fighting with a guy in a space support against a guy in a space support and they've got a banner and you've got a banner, really, any banner reroll you're doing, you're just fishing for a 6. And a little 3-inch banner is only affecting 6 to 8 fights at most. And fishing for a 6, it's maybe going to come off once, maybe twice per turn at best. And that's considering, that's you hoping that they've not got a 6. On that same turn, you get a 6 when you're fishing for it. So I'm not actually sure it's that worth it. I think there is an argument to be made that you, especially at small points, if you're running a low quality army and you don't have a particularly big hero that really, really needs a banner, you can get away with not running one. And in terms of scenarios that give out banner points, you're right, you are potentially missing out on points there. You're giving your opponent maybe a lead as well. However, when I build my lists, and what I would do is if you ever build a list without a banner, a consideration to make is, how will I get rid of my opponent's banner? Do I have a trick? Do I have a way? Do I have a threat that can reliably have a good chance of getting at my opponent's banner and getting it off the board? And I think there's a lot of lists where that can be the case, especially for evil. You don't need a banner a 3-inch little banner. If you've got a hero banner or a board-wide banner like that, small, brilliant. But if you've got just a little 3-inch normal banner, it's not doing that much for you. So there we go. That is probably my controversial part of the video. Next, we move on to how many mobile models. So, general rule of thumb is I say you want a minimum of 2 to 3 fast mobile models, whether it be just normal wags or whether it be cavalry of some sort. I don't think you want any more than 6 or 8 in any list, and that's including your heroes. They've got big bases. If you lose a move off, you're getting bogged down. One attack, they're going to get dragged down and killed. It also reduces your numbers significantly if you're taking a lot. I generally will go somewhere between 3 and 6 in every list. At low points, at this sort of level, maybe 2 to 4 is about the right amount. And then moving on to bows, I'd say minimum 3 in every list, just so you've got something to threaten enemy horses and heroes, just so it changes how your opponents play. They're unlikely to actually do anything, but it's the possibility that they could changes how your opponent plays, and that makes a difference. They can also just sit on an objective, and they might as well do something if they're stood there. They might find a shot here and there. I'd say 3 to 6, unless you are a decent shooting army. If you're not a decent shooting army, never take more than 6. It's not relevant, really. They're not going to do much for you. And if anything, you're just hindering your own movement. Next consideration is how to plan for courage. So I say this especially at low points because at low points you've probably got less models, in which case you're more likely to break, in which case you need to plan for it. So think to yourself when you're building the list, how am I planning for courage? How am I planning for when I break? Ways to deal with this is have multiple heroes that can be reliable on courage to hold your army together. Also, if you're running a low points army, you either need to have high enough numbers that you're unlikely to break, or just don't take the low courage troops or many of them in the list. You need to make sure you've got some that will reliably stick around and do stuff for you in the late game, because you're more likely to break at lower points. And then last of all, how to play for the objectives. So when you're building the list, look at your list and think, okay, if the objectives and the scenario require me to be mobile and get from one place to another, how would I be doing that? Just a question to ask yourself. Anyway, we'll move on. I'll probably be a bit quicker at each of the other points levels because some of it I've already kind of addressed. So how many models at 600, 750? Again, it depends on the quality of your army, but you want to be running somewhere between, I'd say, minimum 30. When you get to 700 plus, I'd say you want 35. And you don't want to be really any higher than 50. I think if you're going higher than 50, you're being a bit daft because you're going to have, it's going to be hard to bring the numbers down. I think once you get beyond 50, 55 models, it's hard to bring those numbers to bear. Because of terrain, because of how fast things move, it's very hard to get all 50 models engaged in combat all in one turn. You're going to get a lot that just kind of get in the way and stand behind the lines, and then your low quality on the front line will be exposed. I also think that it means you're probably reducing your hero's ability and effectiveness if you're taking so many. So I think if you're a high quality army, 30 to 35. If you're a low quality army, somewhere between 40 to 50 is about right. In terms of heroes at this points level, I'd say you want minimum 3, pushing up to 5 depending on your army. Probably 3 to 4 in almost every army. 5 is just if you've got quite cheap, cost-effective heroes, probably more for evil than good. That will give you an average there of somewhere between about 8 and 10 might at this points level, which I think is about right. Some armies will have less because they're paying tax for some expensive heroes. Personally, to give you a nice, balanced, competitive ability in games, I like between about 8 and 10 in this sort of range. It depends on your army, but I still think there is a slight argument for not taking a banner, especially on the evil armies, if you've got, or even good armies where they've got quite a lot of numbers. A 3-inch banner doesn't actually affect that many of your fights if you've got quite a lot of numbers. So really, you just want them to be following around a big hero or multiple big heroes if you keep them together. But if your list isn't really relying on that, if you're running ring wraiths and support heroes, you're probably not going to get much value out of having a banner. It might not be worth it, especially as well if you've got tricks to deal with your opponents. Mobile models for this points level, again, I'm going to say minimum 3, but I'm going to say more between the 3 and 6 range than the 2 to 4 I said in the previous. There's more going on the board. You maybe can't have all your cavalry and mobility in one place. You maybe need to split them up. I like them running around in packs of 3. If you lose one stupidly to some shooting or a daft moment, you've still got 2. They can still get some knockdowns. They can support each other. You can get some kills. I like them running around in packs of 3 or 4. So somewhere between 3, 6, 3 to 8. I think that's about right. Bows, again, if your army's not very good at shooting, minimum 3 to 6. Just to threaten some bows. I'd say really you want to take 6, I would take at this points level. So you've got 2 packs of 3 running around in a little triangle of doom or base contact, all able to shoot in all directions. But you can take more bows, of course, if you've got a decent shooting army. I don't generally like to encourage people to play a shooting game. It's boring, it's not interactive, you're not doing anything with skill, and it's not how I want to play. Planning for courage, it's not as much of an issue at this points level because you've got more models, you're less likely to break if you play it right. But if you still need to consider, if I do break, how am I going to hold together? Have I got heroes that are going to be reliable and keep my army together? And last of all, playing for the objectives. The reason I say you want a competitive balanced amount of numbers and a decent amount, but not too high, is you want to be able to play the objective. Can I hold objectives? Do I have the numbers to hold objectives? Do I have not enough numbers and decent quality that I'm not going to just automatically lose at Lords of Battle, for instance, and scenarios like that? A lot of things to consider with that one, but try and think about it. Is there going to be any scenario that I'm going to be extremely weak at? Okay, is there a way I can tweak my army to be a little better at it? And last of all, we'll move on to the high points level armies and those games at events. How many models? I'd say you're wanting minimum 40. I'd say that is the minimum sweet spot. 40 models at 750, 800 or more. I think you want to be pushing 45 to 50. Even into the low 50s. I think 60 models plus is a bit ridiculous because, again, you're never going to bring those numbers to bear. I think between about 45 and 55 is the perfect sweet spot. It gives you enough numbers to make it hard to break you. You cover all of the board. You can get all the objectives. You can get enough heroes in there to complement the army. I'd say you're wanting minimum 4 heroes at this sort of points level or above, somewhere between 4 and 6, depending on the quality of them. And that will give you somewhere between 10 to 14 might. I think the average is probably 10 to 12. I like to go a little bit higher. I would aim for somewhere between about 12 and 14 at this sort of points level. I'd try and fit in 4 heroes myself, minimum, maybe 5, get myself to, as I say, 12 to 14 might. It depends on your build. If you're going full horde, you probably don't need a banner. If you're low quality, you don't need a banner. If you've got a hero that you really care about, a good quality hero, which you probably should have at this points level, you do need a banner. So I'd say nearly all the time you'd need a banner at this sort of points level. Mobile models, at this sort of points level, I think you can go a bit higher. So I think I'd minimum say you want 4 or 5, but I'd be pushing for somewhere between 6 and 8, maybe even pushing up to 10 to provide you threat and also to run around in a couple of different mounted areas and warbands. Bows, you want, again, minimum 6, I'd say. Depends on the quality of your army. But minimum 6 and take more if it makes sense for your army. Courage with this army, because there's a lot going on the battlefield and a lot of models, there's a lot that could get killed each turn, meaning you can get broken. And if you do, you've got such a big army, it's probably quite split up. You need to be considering, do I have multiple things that can hold my army together? How can I place them and position them to be able to hold my army together? And then moving on to how you then play the objectives. Do you have heroes and might that you can spread around the board to give you control in different parts of the board? That is going to be essential. Do you have ways of breaking through as well? And now moving on, I've just put together what I consider a balanced list at 800 points. Now, I'm generally quite known for Birdie's Horde. It is Birdie's Horde in my eyes. And it's great to see a load of other people enjoying it and using it now. It's not top tier competitive, but it's not rubbish either. It's decently competitive. It'll have a chance in every game it plays. It's got a nice theme to it, a lot of personality. Bird has been buffed nicely. And just going through this list, the reason I say it's balanced is you've got 56 models at 800 points. That gives you a good amount of numbers to fill the board. You can bring your numbers to bear quite nicely because Bird has warband ambushes onto the board. I have given him a full warband. We've got multiple hitters and threats, so Birder can do damage. He's got a hill troll that can do damage. The Wag Riders can give you some knockdowns nearby. You've got 2 Wag Chieftains that provide a lot of damage. And then you've got sheer weight of numbers and dice as well. And even the 2 captains at strength 4 can do a little bit of damage too. We've got 11 might in the list. Birder can potentially get it back with a General Hunter as well. It's not reliable, but he can get one. You've got a banner following him around because he's the one that really needs it. You can also get the Wag Chieftain near to the banner because they could use it as well. No one else in the list really needs a banner. The Hill Troll, but the Hill Troll stays close to Birder as his bodyguard, basically. So you don't really need another banner. Birder can become a banner himself with kills, which is nice. And yeah, it's just a good, well-rounded list all round. We've got 6 bows in there to threaten some horses. We've got 56 models to absorb shooting. If we consider all the different things that I talked about earlier, if you face a big monster, Birder is a decent answer to most things. They'll at least have a chance. The Wag Chieftains can also do damage if they're in the fight with him and he wins the fight. They can put out some damage, which is good. You've got the Hill Troll that is fight 6 and pretty reliable with 4 dice, well, 3 dice plus 2 rerolls with a banner nearby. You've got mobility in the Wag Riders, the Fell Wags, the Wag Chieftains. They can also use their might while isolated against just enemy cavalry if they've not got a hero nearby. This is what I would consider a well-balanced list. I've done well with this at tournaments. I think with a good pilot it can just about win events, but it's generally a top half of tournaments finishing list, and it will do all right. And I just enjoy using it, so I thought I'd show you that. And yeah, that is it. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please let me know what you think below. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed the video or you want to see more of this. These do take quite a bit of time to put together, so I appreciate your support. And hopefully you've all got something out of this and it's been helpful and useful. Please let me know, comment. I'd love to hear what you think. And I'll hope to see you at all events soon. Take care. Have a nice evening.